It's being webcast, so welcome to all of you out there watching in cyberspace. And to you who got up for breakfast this morning, this is a panel called Innovation from the North. This has nothing to do with Game of Thrones. This is, winter is not coming to Los Angeles, at least not the way it is in Toronto. Here are our speakers arrayed across this table. Immediately to my left is Anna Serrano, the Chief Digital Officer for the Canadian Film Center. Eric Shamlin, who's the Managing Director of the Los Angeles office of Secret Location, a Toronto-based digital production company. On the far end is Roy Taylor, who is the Vice President and Manager of Partnerships and many other things for AMD, the chip manufacturer and designer. And Ian Dawson, sorry, pronounced that wrong, a film producer who's just worked on his first horror film in VR. And I am Nick DiMartino, am your moderator. I'll tell you a little about myself in a moment. I'm going to set this up and explain why we decided to do this panel. And we're going to have presentations from each of the panelists, have a little conversation amongst ourselves. I have some questions, and I'm sure I'll develop more, as will you. And we'll have plenty of time towards the end of the session for you to have Q&A. So make sure you keep track of all your questions. A little about myself. I was at the American Film Institute for 20 years, in charge of digital media and technology. I have a consulting business. As it happens, one of my clients is the Canadian Film Center. And as I was talking to Anna about some of the great things that they're doing in VR, the more I talked, the more I realized that this is a perspective about this market and this emerging category of digital content and technology that the Canadian economy is uniquely positioned to take advantage of. So why not use that as a filter? This is not primarily about Canada. This is primarily about VR. But as you'll see, we've highlighted and featured people who are working in this space from Canada. We had a couple of dropouts, as well as the panelists that are here, and I'll only mention one. One of the guys couldn't come today, but he asked if he could participate as a hologram. And I thought, well, why not? And now I know why not. But it was canceled yesterday. But apparently he was going to be at the end, and it was going to be some kind of a thing that would make him like Tupac and be transmitted live via the internet from Montreal. But that didn't happen. So next time, perhaps. Let me say a few words about the Canadian environment and why I think there's something unique and special about this market for VR. Many of you know, if you're in the film business, that there's an unusually lucrative environment for the production of content and technology in Canada because of the program that they have for research and development tax credits, for incentive for tech innovation. There's a lot of funding available in the public-private partnership model. There's a lot of entrepreneurial support. And they particularly target intellectual property industries. Last year, I believe it was last year or the year before, they announced a targeted program for accelerated visa approval for international workers who want to come to Canada to work on particularly high-tech, but certainly startup and entrepreneurial ventures. And there's a strategy by the government to focus on specific clusters, and one of them is digital content and communications and technology industries. One of the rankings found that Canada's #1 core innovation policy for the government. The UK is #2, the US is #3. There are 40,000 communications and technology firms in Canada. 30% of them are in Ontario, the largest population center. And of course, where I first encountered Canada was because of its leadership in film and television and games. There's a deep history there in terms of production capabilities, the talent pool, the university structure, and all the rest. So the only additional point on this slide is that the new government, elected on Monday, the Liberal Party has promised $900 million of new money to be invested in accelerators and entrepreneurial activities. And that's good news for us, because one of the things that I do with Anna at the Canadian Film Centre is Idea Boost, which is an accelerator for early stage companies in digital media and technology. These companies listed here, Bubble Technology, Vertical, Large, Stage 10, and Adoko, are all companies that are hardware or software or both in VR, AR, and related technologies. And this is, these are 5 of the 30 or so companies that we've incubated in the last 2.5 years, and we have a new cohort coming online. So those companies can be, they need to be Canadian companies, but they can be in partnership with US partners. So if you're interested, talk to one of us about that. Just a few of the companies that I tried to get to come to fly to Los Angeles to be on this panel from Canada that are in the VR specific areas include these on the list. Some of you know some of these companies. Obviously, a company like Ubisoft, which is an example of one of the leaders in games, is headquartered there. Felix and Paul is a company that's specialized in VR, somewhat similar to, I think, to Secret Location, in the sense that they've targeted the market for VR, and many of the others. So I think that we've established that there's a lot of innovation, and what we want to do now is see some of it. Here are my contact information. You can certainly come up to me afterwards and check this out. But I'm going to turn it over to Roy, who we don't have to do any switches of the computers because he's not going to be using a computer, and talk a little about the overview and AMD's position in the VR market.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Oops. Can you put your hand up if you've ever heard of AMD or you know who AMD are? Great. Thank you. Well, I'm going to assume that most of you know AMD as a company which has had a headquarters based out of Sunnyvale, California, and made microprocessors, and indeed still does so today. But the GPU part of our business, AMD acquired in 2006, was a company called ATI. And ATI is based out of Markham in Canada. And we're very proud of the Canadian team up there. The GPUs which we make and sell are designed in Canada. And the reason that we keep the team there is because we found that the Canadian environment and educational system has been fantastic for producing some world-class minds and some world-class innovations in GPU technology. Technology which is going to be really important for everybody in the room, whether you're a filmmaker or a writer or a producer or are interested in any aspect of VR. Because as Palmer Luckey recently said himself, VR just cannot get enough GPU. So I'm really pleased, as you can hear, I'm British, but I'm very pleased to have the chance to be here to represent my Commonwealth friends from up in Canada. We believe that the creators of VR are going to need some specific tools, that some of the GPU products which are available today are not actually either perfect nor adequate for some of the VR things we're going to need to do. For example, we believe that it's going to be possible to create interactive VR using video. Today, most video called VR is static. You can look around, but you cannot move. And we lose some presence through that because we want to move. But by using very high quality video stitching, we can create the ability to give the feeling of interaction. Very high quality video stitching is not only going to require pretty strong GPU performance, it's also going to need very large memory frame buffers and very high quality memory management. So I'm pleased to be able to tell all of you here today that AMD is actually working hard to produce these products. We have the world's only 16 gig professional graphics card for doing video work today, and we'll be bringing out new versions of those soon. I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch. I just want to tell you that we are working hard to produce products for you to help you create. But the other thing that's great about Canada is its history and its success in telling stories. And the Toronto Film Festival is, I think, one of the best in the world and one of the most well-known, and for good reason. And so we're working hard with Anna, with the film festival. We'll be supporting it next year and using it as a place for us to show off some new content which AMD will be commissioning. So one of the other things we're doing is not only creating great hardware, but actually wanting to work with filmmakers, with producers and VR creators to help you tell your story in the best way possible. And that's one final point I want to make, and then I'm going to shut up and hand over to my other panelists here. I'm a little concerned about VR. I'm a little concerned about cardboard. I'm a little concerned about Samsung Gear, because although those are great ways to introduce VR to people, I don't believe they're going to necessarily produce the VR experience which is going to change the world and fulfill the promise of VR. And since we're all here this morning talking about VR, I'm going to assume that you care about it as much as we do. In order for the promise to be fulfilled, we're going to need really, really great VR. VR that's going to blow your socks off. VR which is going to astound and astonish. But that's not easy to do. It's not easy to fund at a time when the whole technology is so new to everybody. And so I want to just finish on this point. In 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T, and it cost $850. At that time, the hourly wage rate was 22 cents. The annual salary was about $200 to $400. So the car cost more than 3 times your annual salary. In addition to that, there was really no infrastructure for the car. The roads were not very good and there were no petrol stations. And yet somehow the car delivered us an experience so fantastic that 3 years later they were able to reduce the cost to $350. What we're looking for, what AMD is willing to invest in and sponsor and support, is anybody in this room that can help produce an experience so fantastic in VR that all other considerations are put aside because we want to be in it so much. And so that's why we're keen to come to these events and to exchange business cards and to meet any of you that think that you can help produce the Model T Ford of VR. So thanks for listening to that. I'll hand over to my other panelists.
Great. Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Slight technical change. This is Anna Serrano.
Wait a second to go back there.
And this is Anna Serrano's Mac.
Okay, there we go. Are we on?
You have to...
Okay. Thanks very much, Nick, and thank you very much for joining us today, this morning. So as Nick said, I'm the Chief Digital Officer at the Canadian Film Centre. And for those of you who don't know what the Canadian Film Centre is, it's similar to the American Film Institute. And like the American Film Institute, it sort of has a pedigree of supporters and founders who come from the Hollywood commercial film industry. It was founded by Norman Jewison about 25 years ago, and we boast a whole host of mentors and chairs and instructors in the film, television, digital media, and music and acting sectors. And not only do we sort of train talent in these spaces, but we also make things. So, for example, we have a CFC Features program that has developed, seminal genre-based works like Cube, which is now in its 4th sequel. And we also do documentaries like the much lauded Stories We Tell by Sarah Polley, which was developed out of our NFB CFC documentary program. We run a variety of markets where we pair talent with major studios in LA. This is our Comedy Exchange program. And we also develop TV shows like the much lauded Orphan Black, which was developed out of our Bell Primetime TV program and was subsequently developed as an award-winning show. So all of that is pretty clear because we're called the Canadian Film Centre, and that, you know, we really are the preeminent institution in Canada for those types of cultural industries. But in '97, we also added the Media Lab, which was essentially focused on the future of storytelling and the training of talent in that space. And like what we did in our core programs, the Media Lab also not only looked at talent, but we also started producing work. So in 2003, we created the first ever user-generated content site in Canada in collaboration with the Canadian Broadcaster Corporation, CBC, called the Great Canadian Story Engine, as well as the first interactive feature film to be launched at the Toronto International Film Festival, which we co-produced with the National Film Board called Late Fragment. So we have this history of essentially training talent to become successful, commercially successful artists in the cultural industry space, both in traditional media and in digital media. And in particular in digital media, our history has really been about how do we fully understand the breadth and depth of interactive storytelling from an artistic standpoint, from a business standpoint, and from a commercial standpoint, regardless of the medium. So it's not a surprise that the Film Centre, as VR became a lot more mainstream the moment sort of Oculus Rift was bought by Facebook, that we migrated into the VR space too. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about today, after that kind of context, is just show you a couple of the VR projects that we've done to date, and talk a bit about what our VR plans in the future might be, okay? So the first sort of, well actually I should go back a little bit to say that in fact when we started to experiment with the AR and VR forms of storytelling, we did not in fact begin with the Rift. We began with the Glass. So we've been producing work and experimenting with work in the AR and VR space as early as 2011. When we started to develop a whole series of labs on augmented reality, and in particular using the Google Glass as our platform for experimentation. And we worked with a Silicon Valley startup at that time who had an authoring platform that allowed creators to produce work that would then get published across a set of platforms, wearable platforms at the same time. So that was our first foray into sort of the AR that was our first internal production foray into the AR space, which was quite successful. We produced 6 different Glass applications that involved gaming all the way to productivity applications. And internally, we produced the very first real-time photo effects filter for Glass. And most of them were actually in play in the Google Glass Store when Google decided to abandon the project entirely. So we switched gears and we moved into VR, and our first sort of major asset or IP that we had already in development that we thought lent itself to VR extension was Body Mind Change. So Body Mind Change is essentially a transmedia project that stars David Cronenberg. That was the digital extension of a large museum exhibition of his work, which was being done by TIFF. And so we decided to create this project together as a co-production with TIFF, where we created an episodic website experience that generated a 3D object called the pod. And so the whole piece was predicated on a conceit that David Cronenberg had essentially licensed all the IP to his movies to a biotech company, and that biotech company was creating this biological entity called the pod, and if you wanted a pod implanted in your neck because it will help you anticipate your desires, you would have to sign up as a beta tester. And so we had thousands of people sign up as a beta tester. They had to go online. The website experience gathered all their data, and then that data then informed the type of 3D printed object, custom 3D printed object they would get. They would go to our physical installation in the TIFF Bell Lightbox and get the pod. And so when, and that's what the pod looks like there. And so we delivered thousands of these things, and it was attached to the TIFF Bell, the TIFF exhibition of Cronenberg's work. And then subsequent to that, we decoupled the two experiences because we found that it was actually a great enough standalone one. And so we're in the process of actually remounting the whole thing, which would include VR. So as a way to essentially tease the audience of this kind of work, we created a riff teaser that would kind of tease people into anticipating this large mounted exhibition that we hope to have sometime this year. And here's the teaser that I'll just play for you. Oh. It's a bit dark. Okay, so this is just a walkthrough. And essentially, it's just a 2-minute teaser. But basically, what we wanted to do with this first exploration was to really try to marry linear video assets that we created as part of our overall web experience and marry that into a 3D constructed space that would feel like the environment of the pod implantation site, okay? So I won't, this is really terrible, so I won't keep playing it. You know, it's too bright. And this is obviously dark and all about horror, etc. But this was just a kind of an experiment that we did, which wasn't that meant to be really shared in a kind of public or marketing way. We thought, let's just do something and launch it at a small event. But we didn't realize the extent to which VR would actually capture people's imaginations. And so now that's why we have plans to develop a much bigger project with Body Mind Change using HTC Vive. And so the idea, and it really is about the marriage of a particular type of content with this platform. And we felt that with Cronenberg, with this whole IP property that involves, you know, biological objects, with the kind of iconic objects that we have access to in his films, whether that's the Videodrome helmet or the pod, the pod in The Fly, we are able to take all those assets and put them in an environment that is very compelling and appealing to a lot of his fan base. And we're doing this work with a wonderful collective called Occupied VR, and in particular, the teaser was, which is a Toronto-based company, and the teaser was largely directed by Blair Renault, who is of Technolust fame and has won the Oculus Rift Jam prize as well as a variety of awards. He's also in Toronto. So after that whole project, we then wanted to move forward in terms of our other VR productions, and so we've been developing this series called VR Sketches, and it's really a way to help filmmakers start to understand the language of VR. So these are small experiences, largely using live action video, but also married to 3D structures, and to look at the very particular pieces around what makes VR unique and the experience of VR unique. So, for example, one of the sketches that we've just completed uses photogrammetry, where we actually capture full-blown real people and turn them into characters, and then see how we would behave in a space with those characters. We found all sorts of problems with that, you know, there was a fantastic panel last night that really described what some of those problems were, including the fact that if the character is not moving in a way that you would normally see them move as a real person, then that breaks presence, right? It's all about learning all these things all the pieces around the language of VR is why we created this VR Sketches. And we're continuing that series, working with a variety of different creators to try to really take pieces of the VR language and then exploring them further with complete works. So the piece that I'm going to show you right now is done by a wonderful, again, part of the Occupied VR Collective, and it's called Skate 360, and I'll just show it to you. Hang on. And it's probably not very well, okay. So I'll just talk on top of it again. So this is sort of, it explores a number of things. First, it really explores the notion of how you would marry video with 3D constructed environments. You can't see it well at all projected on the space, but I'm happy to show you on my computer. But basically, what happens is when you capture things in Live 360, often the resolution just isn't really that great, no matter how amazing your rig is or how fantastic the production environment has been. Typically, you still need to kind of go through a post-production process where you create better sort of sense of fidelity of the space that you're developing. So this piece was really about figuring out what the workflow was around how to create live video spaces that look really good using 3D, okay? And then the other thing that we were playing around with was this notion of the fact that only in VR can you really play with space as time. So the introduction of multiple subjects who are obviously the same subject, but appearing and disappearing in time was something we wanted to play around with. And that's something that I think we're going to see a lot more of, because just having sort of an objective camera observing an environment, although we've seen a lot of that in the mobile VR that Roy has talked about, is not really, I think, enough to push the storytelling potential of VR. And so we're really trying to figure out ways in which the live cinematic medium can be used to tell stories in a spatial way as opposed to in a temporal way in the way that we've normally seen them. So I think I'll stop at that, and there's more to talk about that stuff, but I'll give it now to Eric.
Great.
And you have an audio
Yeah.
plug too?
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't get any audio, so,
Oh, I didn't?
no.
Oh, it's okay because they could hear it from the mic.
Take it away, Eric.
Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm Managing Director of Secret Location, the Los Angeles office of an originally Toronto-based company. We are kind of inhabiting a kind of a niche, we feel, kind of in the world of media right now. For a long time, traditional media has been struggling to go digital, whereas we kind of started in the digital world, and we're kind of swimming upstream, as it were, and having some pretty good success at it. So the way we're describing ourselves right now is a content studio for emerging platforms, and basically that means we're just, she used the word transmedia. That's kind of our bread and butter. So we originally started kind of in the digital extension business, primarily catering to entertainment properties, big films, TV shows. We would do their websites and their mobile apps and their games, and we'd maybe shoot some web series or videos for them. And that, we were founded about 8 years ago, and that's sort of organically grown into opportunities to develop our own content and pitch our own content. So now we have a number of OTT and television series now in production. So our business has organically kind of split into the sort of the digital services stuff and now content production. And where those two skill sets overlap is conveniently in VR, which is really exciting for myself. So we were, I think, among the first larger studios to pick up a DK1 a couple years ago and try and figure out what sort of stories can be told with that. We are in 2 offices. We are about 80 or 65 people in Toronto, 5 here in LA. One thing that has sort of differentiated us from the beginning, and this now sounds sort of glib because I think a lot of people are saying this, is we focused on the stories. We didn't want to become a platform company. A lot of companies like ours would become the mobile app people or the social media people or whatnot. And so instead we doubled down on writers and creative people. We also had technologists, very skillful technologists, but we didn't want to become a platform-specific company. So focusing on the stories has really, it was kind of a struggle, but it has been the wiser path overall. And so now we're getting some really unique opportunities to tell stories in this converged landscape. Through it all, we've had a lot of success with our peers and some recognition. Just 4 weeks ago, we were honored with the first ever Emmy given to a VR project. So that gave us a lot of legitimacy as a company, but has also given VR some legitimacy, at least in the eyes of the Hollywood establishment. So it makes those conversations a lot easier to have.
And that was for Fox's?
That was for a project. I'll show a case study for that particular project. That was for a partnership with Fox. It was for their show Sleepy Hollow. And it was a interactive exhibition basically for Comic-Con last year. It debuted Comic-Con. We built a barn. Sleepy Hollow is based in sort of New England, and we recreated one of the sets inside this barn. And the public would come through. They'd get their picture taken as they walked in, and then they'd put on the DK2 and experience this kind of fun little horror vignette based on the show. And then after they'd take the helmet off, they'd walk out and we'd hand them a little postcard with their head chopped off, kind of in the tone of the film. Big success for us, but then we were very thankful that the Television Academy recognized it as well this past month. And I have a case study on that I'll show here in a second. Right now, as I said, we're kind of evenly split in the sort of digital services, digital extension world. We do a lot of television now, but the VR is probably the most exciting portion for us right now. And again, being storytellers, we're really challenged with a lot of what Anna was saying, and how do we tell stories in this new medium? I think for anybody diving into it, there's kind of a decision right at the beginning. Do you go, at least right now, because of the state of the technology, do you go more cinematic, which limits your agency, or do you go more game engine driven, which gives you agency, but currently sort of diminishes the visual fidelity? All of that's rapidly changing, but VR, if there's one truth, VR has disrupted a lot of fields. It's taken well-established disciplines and sort of screwed them up a little bit. Editing for film is different. Acting for VR is different. Camera technology is challenged. And there's a lot of very smart minds trying to solve all these problems. But if anybody says they've got the secret to storytelling in VR, they're probably lying. So we're happy to kind of experiment and play around. We've been blessed with a lot of clients that have given us some budgets to go play around, and luckily we've not completely screwed that up. So narrative in VR is tricky. Shooting it, you have to disrupt a lot of your tools. So this is what a storyboard looks like in VR. You're not playing with 16 by 9 frames anymore. You're playing with a 360-degree field, and so when you're blocking out a project, you need to figure out how you're filling the frame, and the frame now is all the way around you. And a lot of that comes down to blocking actors, how you're drawing attention. Do you use sound, light? How do you draw their attention to a specific area of the frame? And so as you're storyboarding, you can focus on a primary field of view, what you want them to focus on, but you can't ignore the rest of it. I do think there is kind of a temptation to fill action in 360. A lot of first-time VR directors that we deal with, they have this temptation. They want to put action all the way around the user, and that's actually not really necessary. I mean, we live in a 360-degree world. I'm not particularly worried about what's going on behind me. So, that temptation is not a real thing. Like, it's a tool to be used. You know, in horror, you're definitely going to be using the area behind the user, but it's not something that you really need to focus on. Camera technology is dramatically challenged. GoPro has probably become the lead, at least in terms of the entry-level models. And I know they've got the partnership with Google, developing the Jump camera, or the Odyssey camera now. But for cinematic quality, you're still wanting better cameras. And there's a lot of companies that have promised them. You know, there's the Jaunt camera, the Nokia Ozo, there's a bunch of them, but none of them are currently production ready or out there. So to shoot VR, you're kind of confined to DIY, making your own rig. You know, GoPros being kind of the entry level, but this is kind of an example of one of the rigs we're playing with, where it's 6 reds, all gen locked, trying to capture 360-degree footage. There's different processes. This is obviously a stereo rig. Another method right now is using 4 of them and shooting in mono in 360, but then doing a 3D post conversion, just like Hollywood does for most of their big 3D blockbusters. But that has its own challenges in VR. I'm going to play a few of our case studies, or I'll just play 2. I'll play the Sleepy Hollow case study real quick.
The Sleepy Hollow virtual reality.
Let me buffer this real quick. So.
Hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Take it off of HD.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The Sleepy Hollow virtual reality experience is an innovative narrative-driven fan experience that debuted at San Diego Comic-Con 2014 in support of the hit Fox series. Combining Oculus Rift technology, a custom-built app, and an atmospheric live setting, Secret Location created an immersive, one-of-a-kind installation that thrilled thousands of excited visitors and reached millions in social media. The cutting-edge VR experience utilized top-quality CGI graphics, 360-degree sound, and live-action video to deliver a gripping narrative that plunged users deep into the world of Sleepy Hollow.
Stay where you are. In the dark, in the fog, he might not detect you.
Through the magic of virtual reality, visitors found themselves in the show's spooky graveyard setting, receiving a dire warning from the main character, Ichabod Crane, moments before a hair-raising encounter with the Headless Horseman. The experience thrilled visitors and generated huge buzz at Comic-Con, as well as socially through a custom digital souvenir. To capture the experience for attendees, we built a custom mobile app that created personalized images for each visitor to the installation, creating engaging content directly out of the event. The app took visitors' photos and automatically composited them into a pre-designed backdrop from the virtual reality scene they were watching in the Oculus Rift, along with tune-in details for the second season airings. By the time the scene was over, the finished souvenir images were already on display at the event and sent to the user's email or Twitter accounts, enhancing the Impulse social pass-along. The final piece was designing the whole installation around Fox's eye-catching Sleepy Hollow Bridge for maximum exposure and participation. Over the entire production process, Secret Location worked hand-in-hand with Fox for a deeply authentic experience. We collaborated with the showrunners and writers to capture the tone of the series, resulting in an engaging narrative that is firmly grounded in the world of Sleepy Hollow. Key to this was Secret Location filming show lead Tom Mizen's original performance in live-action 3D and incorporating it into the virtual environment for a totally unique fan experience. In fact, this was the first time live-action and CG animation had been combined in virtual reality for a television series or a film project. The Sleepy Hollow virtual reality experience offered something new and thrilling and received a massive response from fans and the media. Over 4 days at Comic-Con, thousands of people took part, including cast members from the show, creating millions of media impressions online and socially. enabling a totally unique experience for a legion of loyal fans and those new to the series.
Cool. So right now, there isn't really a public market for VR, sadly. It'll be very soon. Samsung's announced their headset coming out for Black Friday and for the holiday season, but I think most of us, kind of in the industry, aren't anticipating a public or consumer-facing market until about Q2 next year. So right now, most of the budgets we're seeing are in brand extensions or entertainment extensions. But as a studio, we're actually pretty excited about this as kind of a next consumer-facing medium and finding IP that lives natively in that world. We've just recently got greenlit 2 VR series that we're now in production on, and one is a 10-episode, 6-minute per episode franchise. The other is a science fiction, sort of Blade Runner-esque serialized television show that has a VR companion piece for each episode where the crimes happen in virtual reality. So it's a really exciting time to be in VR, but it's also you also biting your teeth a little bit because you're hoping in Q2 next year that the public shows up. So I'm going to show one more video. We just launched a project with the LA Philharmonic. We shot at the Walt Disney Concert Hall with Gustavo Dudamel. And this one, I think it launched maybe 3 weeks ago, and it's just blown up. It had a story in The Economist. I think we just did an interview for NPR, The Atlantic. It's all over. So it's another kind of big success story for VR right now. And I'll play the making of video real quick for that.
Headphones?
I think it's the most dramatic beginning in the history of music because it's so direct. Beethoven opens to you the door to go inside of your essence, but to arrive there you have to go individually.
At the LA Phil, we are so proud of this new virtual reality tour, not just because we're using brand new technology in an unprecedented way, but also because we're sharing our music with the community. We are inviting LA to experience classical music in a way it never has before.
Virtual reality is a 3D computer-generated environment that the user can enter and explore. We're really taking an old art form and making it new for a modern audience.
We used a spherical camera that's essentially made up of 8 modified GoPros to capture the space, to give a sense of presence in and amongst the orchestra that would otherwise not be achievable in real life. And we took that footage and sewed it together to create a stereoscopic 360-degree image. All of this to say, you've never experienced Beethoven's Fifth like this before.
So what we're doing is we're taking this VR experience, we're loading it into a truck, and we're taking it to arts festivals, to museums, to outdoor events, trying to get it seen by people who might not otherwise get to experience one of our concerts. And it's called Van Beethoven.
The CG element brings this piece to the next level. Essentially, we're allowing the user to have a representation of what the music does in the mind's eye. I often love watching people go into VR for the first time. To watch them take off that headset afterwards and see that sense of wonder on their face is incredible.
You can come see us at one of our Van Beethoven tour stops for free, or download our app and watch it on your couch anywhere around the world.
The LA Phil is always exploring new ideas and making them reality. That's what Van Beethoven is all about. Beethoven was a genius who took music into uncharted territory. We are thrilled to present a glimpse of his groundbreaking Fifth Symphony in a completely new way. You'll have an experience like you've never had before.
I've taken up enough time.
Thank you. And then our final presenter is...
Just need that.
Oh, we have to do another switch. It's Ian.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Ian Twassen, and I'm an independent VR filmmaker from Toronto, and I can speak about the indie VR scene in Toronto. I focus on live action, cinematic, scripted narrative VR films. So I was excited by Roy's promise of commissioning VR filmmakers, and your light field cameras, right? So you're not stationary all the time. So that's one of the problems too that I'm facing, is that I'm stuck, or the viewer's always stuck in this stationary spot, and they're looking around, and the challenge is to guide them through where they should look, through the actors, through binaural audio, and then so what I'm doing is I'm learning a lot of techniques in real time through my YouTube channel. So what I'm doing differently is as soon as I make something, I throw it up on YouTube, and I have about 5 videos which altogether have got over 5 million views. Social media was a big reason why a lot of my content has been viewed. I had a few hundred views one day, and then I woke up and there was 2 million on one video, and I didn't know why. Then I found out that Ashton Kutcher shared it on his YouTube channel. Oh, sorry, on his Facebook channel, and so did that rap Lil Wayne. And ever since then, I got about over 20K subscribers, and every time I throw something on there, there's always a big rush of comments. And what I do is I read through the comments and I see what works and what doesn't. Sometimes I would put a scare in a certain spot, and I would read the comments and no one would notice. And then I realized, it was a stupid mistake. I directed the viewer to a certain direction, and then I put the scare in the wrong place. So I'm learning these things as I go along. And so as an independent filmmaker, and because I'm from the north, I'm from Canada, away from Silicon Valley and LA and all that. I find that a lot of the VR filmmakers or the VR professionals at my level are coming together, and we're kind of hacking our ways to learning what works and what doesn't. So I'm actually part of the Occupied VR Collective that Anna was talking about. That was founded by J. Lee Williams, and his hologram couldn't make it today. I heard he was supposed to. Yeah. Right. So he founded a group of us. My specialty is VR filmmaking, and there's a binaural audio guy there. There's a VFX guy. There's a gaming guy, and then we're all right now. We're just learning from each other, and so yeah. What else is there? Yeah, so as a collective, we want to just make original content, but right now, well, for me, I'm getting most of my work through branded content. I'm here because I'm here in LA just because I was shooting something for a company that Mark Cuban is a part owner of. It's 1031 Productions, and they wanted to do a 360 horror experience to promote one of their events, which is the Haunted Hayride up at Griffith Park. And I've been hired by Intel, some realtors, but really what my passion is to make original content that people just want to watch for the content itself. And it's changing every month. Every month the way I'm shooting is changing. Right now I'm just shooting on a 6 GoPro rig with a monopod, and I'm experimenting with movement. like will movement work in a film. I'm experimenting with cutting. Actually, just yesterday I discovered, because I always thought there was no close-ups and no wide shots in VR film, but I just discovered that there really is. I mean, I was shooting in a big field, and then the character walked right, and then I cut into a small room where the character entered right. So there was no really the viewer wouldn't be disoriented if they're following this character. And then the character and everything else in the room was just closer to the viewer. And I felt like this was when I was watching it later at night on my laptop, I did feel like there was that difference. So there is a cinematic language that's being shaped and invented right now. And I think a lot of the problems will be solved very soon, especially with Roy's, like you were saying, with sometimes if you're watching one of these videos I made on your, let's say, Google Cardboard, and you kind of step to the side a little bit, you don't really shift over in the VR space. But I think, so in gaming that exists, but not in live action VR. But that will change. There will be a way to move through live action VR soon because of Roy and because of other companies that I'm researching. So, yeah, my company is called DimensionGate.com, and and I'm still gonna keep on pushing it and posting stuff and learning.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a few questions, but get ready if you have any. Raise your hands if you want to jump in. So, to summarize what I'm hearing, a lot of what's going on right now has to do with testing both the technical production methodologies, the gear, the changes in workflow that are required, and the aesthetics that you're trying to deliver in order to be able to tell a story. I love this feeling that we're at the beginning of a medium. It's like, the invention of tracking shots for Birth of a Nation or something. I'd love to have those of you involved in this to try to talk about what you see as the biggest workflow problems and the sort of infrastructure technology problems, and what the challenge, the aesthetic challenges that you're working on that you see as critical to solve that you don't think have been solved yet.
Well, I'll start. So the next sort of initiative that the Film Center is going to be doing in VR is we're creating a VR lab. We're in the process of sort of this. It's not quite announced yet, but we're in the process of creating a VR lab for documentary filmmakers. And so one of the critical pieces that we're trying to solve before we actually launch that lab is, can we find the right camera rig that will enable these documentary filmmakers to actually direct VR more easily? And so we're hoping that we're going to trial the Ozo camera from Nokia, because that seems to have the best answer to how you might start to pay attention to the content that you're capturing versus paying attention to the technology kind of rigs that you have to play around with.
It has a kind of a video assist.
So it streams directly onto the headset, and essentially you can then direct the 360 space, knowing full well what's happening within the 360 space. And so that, I think, it would be a massive, massive win, so that you're not essentially directing blind, which I'm sure you guys, well, we did for a number of our other projects, and I know that you guys did the same.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple different areas that are really struggling right now. I think camera technology, again, there's a lot of players trying to do that. Ozo is a big one, I think, and then Jaunt and Google. I think camera technology is a big one, because right now in order to do high quality cinematic video, you're relegated to stitching multiple cameras, and there's 4 camera rigs, 8 camera rigs, 6 camera rigs, there's even 12 camera rigs, and so and basically that's stereo pairs, one for one set, half of that is for the left eye, half of it's for the right eye, and then in post production it's an intensely labor, or an intense labor sprint to stitch all that video together. So I think a camera that can stitch in real time, give you live preview. I mean, this is sort of the wish list of a lot of productions we're doing. Like, real time stitching, live preview, uncompressed, raw file types. It's a big challenge.
So it's not just the camera, but it's other elements of the workflow that are like.
Yeah.
Well, it's the camera is the one that has raised the issues around the workflow.
Yeah.
So that's really what happened is new parts of the workflow emerged as a result of the fact that you're actually using multiple cameras to shoot with.
So there's a whole nother step to post-production and stitching this video, which is very labor intensive. If we can get rid of the stitching or do auto stitching, which is what a lot of these cameras are sort of promising to do, that would
Isn't there another point there? One of the challenges I think we have right now is that we have to keep dipping in and out of VR to produce VR. And the biggest challenge right now, I believe, is that the tool industry, Autodesk and Adobe and all of the people that make the tools which have been so useful to date, need to get a grip of the notion that we can't keep taking the headset on and off.
Yes. The live preview in a headset, and there are jury-rigged versions of it out there, but to have kind of an off-the-shelf professional solution that allows you to just plug in a headset, no matter which headset it is, that would be another big game changer for us.
The other thing that's emerging that we're looking at as an accelerator, so I didn't talk about the fact that we do internal productions, but we also run this accelerator, digital entertainment accelerator, which Nick alluded to. So we're also very interested in investing in a number of technologies that do real-time VR editing with a live preview. Right now, it's not at the 90 frames per second. That's the good number for Vive. It's still below that, but there's a number of Canadian companies. The one that's most effective seems to be the one run by Tim Dashwood, and he's created a plugin for After Effects and a number of these suites that people use for editing to edit with VR.
Yeah, we use it.
I use it too.
It can be a lifesaver on projects.
So that's a very, and it's on the market. So if you're like Ian and you want to just do, and you're an indie filmmaker and you just want to do your own VR quickly, both of you guys use that plugin?
Yeah.
So that's something to purchase. I think it's $1,200.
What's it called?
You know what? I know Tim, but I forget.
I think it's called Dashwood.
Oh yeah, it's good. Dashwood 360.
Oh wait,
it's a
something,
plugin
yeah.
for After Effects, Final Cut, and Premiere, and allows you to basically edit on your nonlinear editing system, but have a DK2 plugged in.
Yeah.
And see the edits in real time. It's very valuable. I know a lot of the NLEs are trying to add that functionality, but they sort of were the first really to do it.
So, history of these things in past art forms, the tools frequently drive the aesthetics, and the aesthetics drive the tools. What I'm hearing you say is we need to get the tool makers, a little more alert.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things about VR right now is everything is changing. All of the established giants and success stories to date won't necessarily be the success stories tomorrow. Whether that's a studio or a distributor or a tool maker, software, hardware, everything's about to change, which is scary, but also very, very exciting.
I can't wait for that change because as an independent, I'm the guy with I have a backpack here and a monopod, and every time I shoot, I'm the one. I have no camera assistant. I'm the one changing the batteries and GoPros. I'm shooting with 6 GoPros, and they're all screwed onto this rig. And as soon as one of the cameras goes down, I got to unscrew it, change the batteries, and as soon as I want to shoot my next shot, another battery goes out, and I got to change that battery, and so right now the workflow really sucks. So I'm waiting for that camera. I'm excited for the Ozo because I think that might be a solution for me.
It's about the price. I mean, I don't know if this is actually. I think it is. The price point is about almost approximately the same as 2 Reds. I think
Yeah,
that's what they're talking about.
it's still
So it is
kind of-
expensive. It's not, I mean, I think the other place where a company like AMD is going to be very interesting for us is, we're really more interested in something beyond just capturing live action 360. So it's really about the marriage of CG and live action, where I think, and UI, God knows what that is, that's going to be the key sweet spot for many of the creators who've been in the interactive storytelling business for a long time. And so that's why a project like the Cronenberg project can be a very exciting experimental space to really mine, because it can accommodate all of those three forms, and we can really push the boundaries on what that integration is going to be.
Yeah,
So,
you know what, just to jump in there, I congratulate a company called Crytek as a product called Cinebox
yeah.
to help use the CryEngine in filmmaking. The engines aren't good enough yet, I don't think, certainly for live action, but they're getting close.
Yeah, that would be my thing. Is I think the game engines we're full. Like, we primarily have done live action footage, but we also have a full-on interactive, Unreal team and Unity team. And CryEngine is amazing. I know that a couple of films recently have used CryEngine as their primary rendering tool, which is
Maze Runner.
Yeah, Maze Runner.
Yeah. Well, the other tool that seems to handle video best that's not a game engine tool but behaves similarly to a game engine tool is another Canadian company called Derivative Inc. And they have essentially a data flow engine platform called Touch Designer, and so we've been looking at that as a way to ingest multiple layers of multiple videos, because it can handle super high resolution video, multiple super high resolution videos, and allow you to toggle between them, which some of the other game engines aren't really that good at yet. So that's another kind of authoring platform that I think is something to take a look at.
Great. I only have one other question before I open it up, and that it really has to do with money, because almost always at Digital Hollywood everyone says, how do the budgets look and where's the money coming from? Eric, you talked a little about sort of the fact that at this point in time most of the financing is coming from marketing budgets. This is not unusual. The same was true with apps and websites and so forth. It's either brands or media brands. Roy, you've talked about investment to kind of jumpstart the market as a major technology enabling company. What's going to be required before there is a market like film and television where original content is financed for its own sake, because there's some business model that would provide a return on that investment?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's a question which everybody should be thinking about right now. If we have to stay in VR where the budgets come from marketing teams, you're never going to get more than $1 or $2 million tops for your production. And if we're going to fulfill the promise of VR, you're going to need to have much bigger budgets. Yeah. The issue is how to create content and then how to monetize it through the current model. The Oculus webpage and the Steam digital downloader are great, I think, for gamers, but they tend to be attached to computers which are in the den or the study. And if you want to sell movie content, entertainment content, and we're here in Hollywood, I'm not sure that's exactly the right place. I'm not sure you're going to want to watch a 90-minute VR movie in the den. For that to happen, you need to be in the living room. And for that reason, I think that Sony are going to be well placed with what was Morpheus is now going to be Sony VR, because they're in the correct room. Yep. But more than that, we need to think about solving the problem of getting in front of where people consume entertainment. And then we can get real revenue streams. And we'll have more to say about that.
So it's the chicken and egg with the audience, as always happens in these growth curves. Until you have people who are creating demand, we're not going to see.
It is, Nick, but this is why I'm going to return to the theme I started with, which is the content. I mean, when IBM PC first came out, it didn't sell that well until VisiCalc came along, the first spreadsheet, and then sales exploded. And I think where we're at right now is that the technology is coming along. We've got talented filmmakers, producers, studios, like the gentleman here. But I implore you to go and make something which is just so freaking good that I don't care what I have to spend to get it.
Just jumping in, I think a safe early assumption is that the market will be gamers. I think everybody, talk to all the manufacturers, it'll be gamers. But I think for it to become a true marketplace that we're wanting, you're going to have to attract non-gamers or more casual players. And I think to Roy's point, it's going to have to be in the living room where people can sort of impulse buy that VR experience.
Sorry. So I think you're right. I agree. I think it's the gamers is going to be the first. They're going to be the first audience. But I think once the gamers have those headsets, if we do, I think we should make VR films for those gamers, since they're the ones that are going to be having it first, and then so what stuff that they like genre stuff like horror and sci-fi, and then from there they can, and then when they start telling or sharing their experiences with non-gamers, at that point then we can start making VR film for the mass audience. Right? I think right now the most successful VR cinematic experiences will be stuff that gamers like things that would be in IGN or a Machinima channel, stuff like that.
Jumping in from the audience now, has anyone got a question for one of our panelists? Yes, sir.
Well,
what about porn?
It's already well underway.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a Canadian thing. Just a little Canadian connection here. One of the largest, I don't know why I know this, but one of the largest porn production companies took their entire roster of talent to a studio in Toronto and captured them all, did a full body scan of their entire talent. So they could recreate.
This would be in a secret location?
We had nothing to do with it.
Sorry,
but as always, porn's well ahead of the curve.
Well, I think there are two places that we haven't really talked about too, which I think will be I think obviously, yes, gamers, and it's really about creating that high value content that they'll pay $50 for, okay? And then, so we know that's for sure. But I think then the other space is really social VR, which we really haven't talked about a lot on this panel, but I think that's where you're going to see a lot of value for users, for mainstream users, because they want to have that kind of, we know that from the web, from what happened on the internet, and they want to have that connection. So people like Philip Rosedale, who are doing things with High Fidelity, with his new company, are going to be important people to watch and figure out how that particular company evolves.
You had a question, sir?
Just jump in on that point. This conversation is very home-centric. One of the pieces that AMD did commission was a piece called First, which was the Wright brothers' first flight, and we did that together with Smithsonian. So I think there's opportunities to get finance to do projects which can be outside of the home.
Yeah, I agree.
We also did a project with General Electric called Neuro, which was an exploration of the brain after an MRI scan. And GE was pleased to sponsor that too. So we shouldn't confine ourselves to only thinking about consumers at the home. There's massive other outlets.
Yeah, agreed.
I think we have another question.
I was at Comic Con 2014. I wish I could have went to the event. It was long lines to kill the thing. Had you talked to Fox afterward, like doing another follow-up for this year's Comic Con 2015, or even have integrating anything VR with the audiences who watch Sleepy Hollow, or is that just only a one-time offer? You work with Oculus just for using it as a tool, but not really as an integration with the audience? Are they even having those type of discussions?
I think the perspective they had was that at that point VR was still very new, and I guess it's still very new. But there was a big sort of PR movement around it. So they would be one of the first to use VR to that effect, and they got a massive write-up in the trades and whatnot. So I think there's diminishing returns now for that kind of thing. The press has done a lot of VR stories, so now the projects themselves have to stand out a bit more. They are not looking at VR for Sleepy Hollow that I'm aware of, but Fox in general, Ted Shilowitz, they're very, very interested in VR as a medium.
No, I just not bring from Gotham, a Minority Report. That was that maybe they would have wanted to do
Oh, yeah.
something with those that they.
I think they did commission a small. We didn't do it, but I think they did commission a small thing for Minority Report.
Well, I wish we had more time, but we have run out of it. Let me ask you to thank our panel by a round of applause. And if you have questions about VR or Canada, we hope we can answer them after the panel. Good job.